Now we're going to take a look at supports. To start with, let's take a look at a simple model. So in FlashPrint, I'm going to click File, Examples, 20 millimeter box. Okay. Now, obviously, I don't need supports here because it's solid blue on the bottom, but I'm going to use the Move function to raise the box, let's say 20 millimeters off the plate. Okay, you can see it's floating in midair now. To add supports, I'm going to click Supports, and I'm going to choose Pillar Supports. I'll talk a bit more about the different types in a minute, but for now, click Auto Supports and back. Start slicing, keeping the defaults, and click Slice Preview. Okay, and if I use the slider, we can go down and we can see that the supports are actually just very thin lines that are being built up. And once we reach the top of the support, you can see they're just open. Then the next layer is the first layer of the model itself. So if I use the second slider, you can see the first layer of the model being laid down on top of those supports. And for this particular model, that's fine because these diagonal layers are going to bridge over the tops of those support lines. But with other models, that bridging effect will be less likely to occur, especially if it's not a flat surface like this one is. So if you're working with an organic shape, it would be helpful if the top of the supports was solid so that the model could rest on a solid surface. And if it's a curved solid surface, then you can think of it kind of like a hammock that the model would rest in. So to accomplish that effect, we're going to go back and click Slice, start slicing again, and choose Supports. And we're going to add 2 top layers to the supports. Slice Preview. Again, we'll scroll down, and now you can see there's the supports, and now there's 1, 2 solid layers, and then the model starts to print. So that's going to make a nice solid surface for the model to rest on. Now let's take a look at our sample model that we're going to print for this assignment. Let's see, I'll rehome the screen, get rid of that model. Now we'll click File, Load File, and load the cervical model that we downloaded from the class Brightspace page. Yes, okay, it's on the platform. So when we rotate the model, we're not seeing the solid blue, indicating that it's flat on the platform. I can click Move on Platform and Center, but it doesn't change anything. And in fact, there's probably, well, there definitely is one point somewhere on the bottom of this model that is touching. You can't see which point it is, but you can tell from the unevenness of the model, right, that it's not flat on the bottom, and that's going to cause a problem in printing. And we have color verification of that. These red areas indicate overhangs and the problem areas that we need to address if we're going to print this model. If you're not seeing those red areas, you can go up into the View menu, and there's a Show Steep Overhang option, and you can toggle between Enable or Disable. So now it's disabled. Now it's enabled. It's very helpful. I like to keep that on at all times because it's a quick way to alert you to the fact that you need supports. So let's see what would happen if I just slice this without supports. Okay, so we can see the raft was turned on, but it's only building a raft right at that point. So that's the point of the model that's actually touching the print bed. The rest of it is up in midair. And if we use the layer slider to go down, you can see that that little point of the model is the only part that's touching the build plate. And now it's starting to print this second portion of the model on the right-hand side, but that portion is just floating in midair, as will be the rest of the model as it starts to print. Now, obviously, that filament is just going to fall right down to the build plate, and you'll end up with a plate of spaghetti. So we need to add supports in order to be able to print this model. So I'll go ahead and click View and Home View to recenter everything. And I'll zoom in a little bit. On the right-hand side, there's a supports option, so I'll click that. And you have two different kinds of supports. The first type is these branch supports. And if I click Auto Supports and scroll in, you can see what those look like. Okay, you can see on this one. If the model were taller, you would see more of this branching type effect. And the idea with branching supports is that just a tiny little tip of the branch will be touching the model. And that can be good in some instances and not so good in others. And really, there's no hard and fast rule of thumb that I'm aware of. I think just through experience you'll learn which ones work in which instances. In this case, I've learned that the other type of supports works better. So I'm going to click Clear Supports and switch to this pillar type support. And overhang threshold 55 degrees, pillar size 2.5 millimeters, that's fine. I'll click Auto Supports, and you'll see the difference right away. The type of support that it generates is just straight up support. Once you become more adept at what type and where to place supports, you can manually go in and add a support if you wish. Just click to add. Whoops, there's already one there, I guess. Click to add, or you can delete. So if I don't need one there, I can delete individual supports or add individual supports. But I'm going to clear supports and click Auto Supports again and stick with their recommended supports. I'll mention while I'm here that there's a slider on the side, and if you slide here, what it does is it gives you a ghost image of your model, and so you can see your supports more clearly. This is especially helpful if you are, if you have supports that are in an interior curved part of the model that you won't be able to reach to remove later, and it doesn't really matter if there's some, loose threads of filament. You'll be able to go in and delete those interior supports manually if you need to. But that's more of an advanced technique, so we'll just leave it there for now, and I'll click back. Now I'll click Start Slicing. One important thing you want to do with supports is make sure that your raft is enabled, because those delicate supports won't stick to the print bed very well without a raft. For the supports themselves, I'm going to increase the space to model X and Y and space to model Z by 2 clicks. And so the space to model X and Y is the side of the support, how close it gets to the side of the model. And the space to model Z is the space between the top of the support and the bottom of the model that the support is supporting. If that gap is too close, then if these gaps are too close, then the supports can stick to the model, and it'll be very hard or impossible to remove them. You'll need to use a knife to cut them away. If the gap is too big, then there may be some deformation of the model. But for this machine, I found that these two settings work fairly well. And the other setting I'm going to change is the top solid layers. I'm going to change that from 0 to 2. And we saw with the 20 millimeter box earlier why we want those top layers. Now I'll click Slice and Slice Preview. And I can scroll down and I can see that you see this part here of the support. That's one of those top layers. So it's building a nice support flat surface for the model to rest on as it's being built. This will also help with model removal later because there's going to be kind of a little hammock or raft that the model is resting on, and with a pair of snips you'll be able to get in there and twist those off. Not cut them off, but just by gentle twisting the support should come right off. Let's try it out. We'll save the model. The sprint time is 1 hour, 21 minutes. Choose the USB drive and click Save. We'll print the model in the usual way and take a look at what our results are. My print has finished. We see the raft and the supports. The raft should just peel off along with most of the supports. There's just a little bit left, and most of those just come off with your hands. If you need to, you can use the snips. I'm not cutting the model, I'm just twisting whatever remaining supports might be on there. Well, it looks like I have a few little loose pieces of filament here that I can snip off. Just twist, and you'll see there's some discoloration from where the supports attach to the model, but we can use a hair dryer or a heat gun to eliminate those. These supports came off surprisingly easy. Sometimes you'll need to use the snips to kind of get in underneath that hammock that we talked about, or the top solid layer of the supports, and you can usually twist it off. But in this case, the whole support structure just came right off.